It's tax season, and at LifeLock, we know you're tired of numbers. But here's a big one you need to hear. Billions. That's the amount of money in refunds the IRS has flagged for possible identity fraud. Now here's another big number. 100 million. That's how many data points LifeLock monitors every second. If your identity is stolen, we'll fix it guaranteed. One last big number. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit lifelock.com/podcast for the threats you can't control. Terms apply.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. Stop waiting around for the perfect candidate. Instead, use Indeed sponsored jobs to find the right people with the right skills fast. It's a simple way to make sure your listing is the first candidates see. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs have 4 times more applicants than non-sponsored jobs. So go build your dream team today with Indeed. Get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
Welcome to the Sportsman's Voice Roundup, your weekly look at conservation and sporting community news happening across the nation and on the Hill. Thanks for tuning in. This is the TSV Roundup. Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to this week's edition of the Sportsman's Voice Roundup, your weekly look at conservation news from across the nation for the week of March 9th, 2026. This week, our lead story, we're talking Sunday hunting in Maryland. Kaleigh Leager joins us here in a moment. Other news in the headlines, anglers and boaters are invited to improve the North Atlantic right whale rule. Covered that quite a bit with Chris Horton. We'll get to the highlights there. Multiple CSF priorities advance in Tennessee. CSF priority shooting ranges protection legislation sent to the Indiana governor. And finally, we round things out in the West as there are key wins for sportsmen and women that were secured as Utah gavels out. All that and much, much more, but let us get to our lead story. One of the remaining states in the country, I think all of them being here on the East Coast. Maryland still has some work to do, and Kaleigh Leager is going to brief us on that right now. Kaleigh, welcome back to the show.
Hey, Fred, I appreciate being on here. It's been a while, so it's always nice to join you.
Yeah, no doubt. All right, so recently you were in committee testifying in person in Annapolis. Talk to us about that. What is the option, albeit a bit convoluted, for Sunday hunting rollback in Maryland as we stand here in March?
Yeah, so back in February, not that long ago, I was in the House Environment and Transportation Committee testifying in favor of, I believe it's House Bill 1063. Have a lot of bills in my head right now, but yeah, House Bill 1063. And as you mentioned, it's kind of complicated and complex, but that's not anything new for Maryland when it comes to hunting regs. So currently, it goes county by county, species by species. Some counties you can hunt all day on a Sunday. Some counties you can't. Some counties you can hunt till 10:30. It all varies, and that goes for deer, for turkey. However, there's still remaining prohibition on Sunday waterfowl hunting, or even greater than that, migratory game bird hunting. And that's kind of the most confusing piece. So when we look at some of the testimony that's either for it or against it, when you're looking at that particular provision of the bill, it gets a little complex. But the crux of it is your 60 days to hunt ducks is still 60 days. Your 30 days or 45 days to hunt geese are still those days. It just might look a little bit different on the calendar, and that's kind of what we're trying to educate these committees on. Is you still have the same amount of days. You're not actually losing days to hunt. It just might look a little bit different. And kind of the same thing goes with some of those other Sunday hunting pieces. So the provision in there now that has to deal with turkey hunting and deer hunting, and other species, is the counties that are currently at 10:30, that would be a little bit extended. So, for example, if I'm going to go out and turkey hunt, I can hunt 30 minutes before sunrise to 10:30, and then I would have to stop. And that's again on a Sunday. What this would do is this would allow me to hunt still from that 30 minutes before sunrise to 10:30, but then I would be able to come back at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and be able to hunt until 30 minutes after sunset. That's specifically for deer hunting in there. But what this is doing is it's giving folks on Sundays more time to hunt. I believe it's 5 hours in total they're looking at. But those other 5 hours that I can't hunt is supposed to be focused towards the other user groups, specifically the equestrian community, that usually is one of the biggest opponents of extent or expanding hunting opportunities in the state. So it's trying to give everybody 5 hours to do their own thing on Sundays. You have 5 hours for those non-hunting groups, and then 5 hours for the hunting groups. But it's definitely been an uphill battle. This legislation is coming from a very inclusive user meeting that we had back in the interim of 2025. The House Environment and Transportation Committee worked with our Department of Natural Resources to have a stakeholder meeting. So you had your proponents of Sunday hunting, your opponents of Sunday hunting. We came together in those interim months trying to find common ground on the legislation that we see in front of us now as a result of that. So it's been a long process. I'll be in Annapolis tomorrow testifying on the Senate cross file there. Um, our, Maryland still goes until about the second week of April. So while we seem like we're closed, there's still a lot of work to be done.
It's confusing, I guess, from a non-resident standpoint. As a traveling turkey hunter myself, this stuff would drive me crazy trying to figure it all out. There's some other states that had different issues with turkey hunting specific, but this here is just the county by county, and having watched the testimony and the different bugaboos that different legislators have for their constituents. It's striking to me this can't be simplified, and that this is kind of where the state has, again, air finger quotes, simplified. This is the simplest it gets. From the outside looking in, you think there's got to be a better way, but this is kind of where you guys are at.
Yeah, I mean, there certainly is a better way to do it, right? So we look at our neighbors to the north, you look at Pennsylvania, and obviously we've heard a lot of that on here and through TSVs and years of engagement there. But the simplest thing would to be to do exactly what Pennsylvania did, just fully repeal the legislative prohibition and fully give our Department of Natural Resources the authority to manage all species 7 days a week, just not the six that they currently have. That would be the most simplistic answer. But unfortunately, Maryland being Maryland, I love my state for many reasons. So sometimes the complexities that happen in Annapolis, for whatever reasons it may be, are not favorable, in my opinion. And like you said, not being from here, it's confusing. Well, even being from here, it's
Yeah.
confusing. Um, and there's county autonomy that the legislature likes to give in certain circumstances, but when you look at things outside of our space, it's kind of a we don't care what you think. So it's very complex and confusing. But unfortunately, the state of the state, as we stand here in the old line state, it's kind of not as good as we can get, but it's what we're looking at. And it's in a better posture, I think, than it's ever been.
One of the main sticking points during that hearing was a panel of waterfowlers, most of them being guides, for-profit people out there hunting a shared resource, standing in the way of more opportunity and Sunday hunting rollbacks. And I found it interesting and somewhat, well, not somewhat, completely hypocritical that there was one gentleman that kind of mentioned that the wants and needs are being valued more than others. Um, in talking about the people that want to have these Sunday hunting rollbacks, and their whole crux was they don't want Sunday hunting for one reason or another. Some think that there's going to be this overhunting of Canada geese, and others want to bring their clients in, and they don't want people hunting on Sunday. And I thought that was just kind of a wild statement to make. That you know those their feelings need to be considered, but never mind all the other licensed Maryland hunters, who wanna hunt on Sunday. I just thought it was a very selfish and self-serving statement to hear from that panel, and especially, for a resource that is shared and one that is managed, by multiple countries, not just here in the lower 48.
Yeah, that's one of the biggest opponents to say specifically the waterfowl provision. And again, it goes down to just being able to educate the committee members and the legislators. So one of the things that you may remember in my testimony I specifically said is, this resource, like you just said itself, is managed outside of the Department of Natural Resources here in Maryland. There's the Atlantic Flyway Council, which is made up of Canadian provinces and territories, and then you also have Puerto Rico, and I believe Guam as well. And then you also have all the states here, basically on the East Coast, that are all sharing the same resource, right? So these aren't turkey, these aren't deer. They're traveling way more than, I don't know exactly how far deer can travel, 60 miles per se, and don't quote me on that. But these birds are going way up, especially the AP geese are going up to the Ngava Peninsula, way up in the middle of nowhere in Canada, and are stretching all the way down to Florida and sometimes past. So, this is a resource that we share throughout the continent. In North America here, there's federal guidelines that are set in place to make sure that we do not hunters ourselves do not do any sort of damage to the population. It's completely sustainable. Then within those federal frameworks that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service gets us, states can be more restrictive, not less. So there is literally no way outside of some serious natural disasters and a reoccurring matter that could decimate the population to the point that we cannot hunt them or go back into a moratorium for the AP goose population. But again, that's my job and others to educate the legislators to ensure them that we're not behind something that is going to decimate a population and species by nature. We're here for conservation. We're here not just so our kids and grandkids and their kids have something that we have. We want to leave it that they have something better than we had. So CSF and our partners, we're not here supporting something that is going to decimate a species. Conservation is still number one. And within those frameworks, it's about access and opportunity. And again, that's the job that I'm trying to do here, and hopefully can portray well tomorrow during the Senate hearing.
Yeah, no doubt. There was another interesting part of this bill, is their proposed sunset part of this, where uh, what you guys have been going on basically is more of an experiment. And one of the committee members asked if this would um, end the conversation on Sunday hunting, with the sunset and just getting there. And I felt like that was kind of an ignorant question and an ignorant statement to take. Like, of course, this shouldn't stop the conversation, because when you look down the road a few years when this would sunset, if that's where you guys got to, um, if anything, it should reinvigorate that conversation, because now you have these data sets. And I think, as you articulated in your testimony, you have case studies in Pennsylvania, in Delaware, they're your immediate neighbors, that show there's not been negative impacts. There's not been additional accidents. All this good positive data sets that they can point to. So yeah, the conversation I think should continue and be more robust, and use this data that you will accrue over the next number of years till this thing sunsets again, if it gets to where it's going, and continue that conversation.
Now, and the beauty of the sunset, Fred, is specifically so again, these certain weird provisions in there, right? Like, so we mentioned about the shared Sundays. Okay, I have to stop at 10:30, but I can come back at 3. Or the same thing, there's specifically in the Atlantic population of Canada geese, it's saying that only certain groups geared towards the R3 community can hunt that specific species on Sundays for a certain amount of years. When that sunsets, the ultimate goal of this piece of legislation is to remove the legislative prohibition and grant that regulatory authority to the Department of Natural Resources like they currently already have 6 days a week. So when that sunset happens, the legislature, the end goal of this is the legislature won't have a part in this. They will still have legislative oversight like they do over every state agency. It's not saying that, the DNR is going to be completely on their own and not have any influence by the legislature, but these issues will be dealt with in the regulatory process by the Department of Natural Resources as they currently are 6 days a week for all their game species. Um, it's just taking away that blue law, right? So the whole crux of this entire conversation is moving that authority to the Department of Natural Resources away from the legislature. Again, the legislature will still have legislative oversight like they do all state agencies. It's just moving this, I don't even wanna say argument, it's moving this process to the DNR, which as a hunter or even as a non-hunter, I would prefer, because it's a lot easier to comment on these things through the agency than it is the legislature, right? So either if you're for or against hunting, you have to have a bill for it to go in front of the legislature. So it means you have to find a sponsor. You gotta go through this entire legislative process, which in Maryland, we only have 90 days. It's complex, and it can sometimes be a headache, and for some reasons good, for some reasons bad. But the regulatory process allows you to have a more intimate conversation, be able to be more involved in the process, And to me personally, it's a little bit more accessible than going through the legislative process. So either if you're for or against it, having it a DNR, in my opinion, is the way to go.
Yeah. Hopefully that gets you there, and again, being able to rely on that those details and that data will give them the opportunity to just do what they need to do. Uh, Last thought here, and we always kind of end with this when we're talking about Sunday hunting, is a um, revisiting of the fact that these are completely discriminatory against hunters only. And no matter what state they are and what form they're in, anybody can go out and do anything they want on a Sunday in the outdoors. To that end, I could go fire off a pallet of rounds if I wanted to, just as long as I'm not engaging in hunting practices. So it's completely hypocritical, completely discriminatory against a single group of users who, if not for those hunting licenses, do not get matched at the federal level and contribute to conservation. So, legislators need to take a second look at this and and prevent allow that access that's being prevented now. Is what I'm trying to say. Kaleigh, we appreciate the good work you're doing on this. Bring us the updates as they come, and hopefully you folks down there in Maryland get to enjoy more time on Sundays.
Yeah, fingers crossed and prayers being sent. Thank you, Fred.
Oh, very good. All right, again, my thanks to Kaleigh, and thank you for breaking down that unnecessarily complex issue in Maryland. Like we said, there are better ways. Continuing on, this article rather from our fisheries department from Chris Horton. Anglers and boaters invited to improve North Atlantic right whale rule. This is it's been a little bit since we've talked about this, but it looks like they're taking public comment. Uh, ANPRM invites public input on modernizing the vessel strike reduction rule, including the use of new technologies and improved risk assessments. Recreational anglers and boaters now have a meaningful opportunity to help develop solutions that improve whale conservation while maintaining safety and access on the water. You can read more about that from Chris, and you can go back in time and check out some of the conversations we've had on this. Very interesting conversation topic. Certainly want to make sure that those whales and the vessels around those whales, everyone's being safe, but also not creating a safety problem when the speed reduction and the area in which that speed is reduced can be a hindrance to safety for especially for the boaters should they get caught in foul weather or need to get out of there. Just incredibly slow. And at any rate, you check more of that out from Chris. We'll head to the southeast where Connor Barker is telling us about multiple CSF priorities that have advanced in Tennessee. Uh, let's see here. Senate Bill 2369 and House Bill 2588. They were sponsored by Legislative Sportsmen's Caucus co-chair Senator Paul Rose and Representative Chris Todd that would allow schools to offer students grades 5 through 12 hunter education as part of the students' physical education and health curriculum. 2369 and the House bill passed their respective committees and are now on their calendars and rules committee in each chamber. Tennessee Bill 2183, House Bill 2138, sponsored by caucus member Senator John Stevens and Representative Pat Marsh, would allocate 10% of the Tennessee Valley Authority's payments in lieu of taxes paid to the state to the Wildlife Resource Fund. Last week, 2183 passed the Senate Energy, Ag, and Natural Resources Committee, and the House bill passed House Finance, Ways, and Means Subcommittee. CSF submitted written testimony. You can check out the in article link there to read that if you so desire. In the Midwest, CSF priority shooting range protection legislation sent to the Indiana governor. Senate Bill 176 was introduced by co-chair of the Indiana Legislative Sportsmen's Caucus, Senator Jim Tomes. Protecting shooting ranges from being unfairly and predatorily regulated by local zoning authorities is a priority of CSF. The bill, which was passed in two different forms by the House and Senate, was subject to a conference committee before passing out of both chambers. The bill now awaits the signature of Governor Mike Braun, a former member of the Congressional Sportsmen's Caucus and current member of the Governor Sportsmen's Caucus. You can, again, in article links there to check out some of the testimony that was submitted and our engagement there by Bob Matthews. Heading to the west, Kaleigh Mortensen brings us an update in Utah as they gavel out. CSF thanks the Utah Legislative Sportsmen's Caucus and the Caucus Advisory Council for their continued dedication to advancing policies that support Utah's hunters, anglers, and outdoor traditions. You can read more about those wins and activities happening there in Utah by visiting the article there. Finally, this forestry update from John Kaleigh, where CSF has opposed the Vermont legislation prohibiting forest manager on public lands. Talking about House Bill 276 that aims to conserve biological diversity and maintain landscape resilience. CSF believes this bill is misguided and would have the opposite effect by strictly prohibiting forest management. The bill would remove important tools to combat invasive species, disease, and other threats that a changing climate poses to Vermont's forests. Again, you can read more about that and the testimony that was submitted. Always go to the website, guys, on this here. We appreciate you tuning in, as always, to the podcast. More details, more resources on the website in our media room. Go to congressionalsportsman.org, congressionalsportsman.org. Sign up for the free newsletter. It is free. We're not going to spam you by getting your email there. We're just going to send you the good information while you're there. Brand new website, by the way. Go check it out. It's very well done. Really beautiful job by our team and our comms department. I think you'll enjoy it. Really easy to navigate. Go to the media room. Check out all the podcast episodes. The Sportsman's Voice EPUB. You can go in there and find our issue briefs on all our positions that we have. There's many of them. Use them as a resource as you are crafting legislation or moving legislation for our legislators that are tuning in. All good stuff. All right, that's going to do it for this week's Roundup. We'll do it again next Wednesday. As always, CSF is your inside connection to outdoor legislation. So long.
Thanks for joining us on this edition of the Sportsman's Voice podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, your support is crucial, and you can help us out right now by leaving a review, filling in those 5 stars where available, sharing this episode with friends and family, and engaging with us socially. CSF can be found on Facebook, Instagram, and X, formerly known as Twitter. Together, we can protect the outdoor sports we love and continue to keep you informed wherever you are. That's it for this week. Until next time, we'll see you later.